I like salad. Do you like salad?
Hi, I'm Ho Shin Ho. I'm living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm an immigrant to Canada from China.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea coming to you from Victoria, but more importantly known as unceded Akwesasne territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and I am an immigrant from the United States of America. And you're listening to
Canadian Salad.
Canadian Salad.
Hi.
Hello, Ocean. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday morning, beautiful morning that we are dropping this episode on.
I don't know about your Tuesday morning. Hopefully it's not raining, but our Tuesday morning looks great.
It looks great. You know what? Mine's got some clouds. We'll see what happens. It's one of those, it's sweater weather. Sweater weather.
But sweater weather?
Yeah, that's right. Sweater weather. That's right. Where you wear a sweater and you're not sure if you're going to be wearing it all day, if you're going to take it off, but you're thankful that you have it on. Yes.
It's okay that the sky has clouds. If your heart has no cloud, that's all that matters.
Oh, Hoshin, that's so poetic. Can you stitch that on a pillow for me? I would love to see that.
On a t-shirt.
There you go. Yes, that would be great. Ooh, some new merch for Canadian Salad. Not that we have any merch yet. If we get people paying us to do this, maybe we could.
You know where to find us. Our Instagram is Canadian Salad.
That's right.
Same as our TikTok. And our website is canadiansalad.ca. And you can also email us hello@canadiansalad.ca.
Yeah, that's right. If you're like, you know what, I believe in you, here's some money.
Exactly. Tip
That'd be
us.
great.
I
Tip us.
love money throwing at my face.
I've never had that experience, so I am all for trying something new.
You should go to be a stripper. Then you
Career choice. I'll think about that.
go dancers.
I've always wanted to wear go boots. Yeah, they look warm. Sweaty.
Yeah.
But today's episode, we are approaching Truth and Reconciliation Day, September 30th. And we're really going to explore why I believe integration into Canada is synonymous or at least equals Indigenous allyship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think as immigrants, we're not given a whole lot of information about Indigenous history in Canada, or even what is the current pulse of how the government is relating to or not relating to Indigenous peoples. So I think it's really important that we have this discussion and that we all accept the responsibility that we have to be allies to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Exactly. The importance is this responsibility part that we just mentioned. Okay, every immigrant who landed here, who lives here, who enjoying the benefits of living in Canada, also have to understand this benefits that comes with responsibilities to our Indigenous allies and friends and people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we do, as immigrants, this isn't of all immigrants. I will definitely acknowledge that there is a very big difference between maybe immigrants that came here a few years ago, or even what's happening with temporary foreign workers, or even students, international students. We are given quite a lot of privileges. And if you compare it to some privileges that Indigenous communities actually have, we have more privileges than even people who have lived here since time immemorial. So it's really important to use those privileges with responsibility. Yeah.
Yes, because some of these Indigenous communities doesn't even have clean water. Which has been a long process of getting just clean water.
Yeah, exactly.
Indigenous communities. We don't have to worry about that. That is a privilege that we do enjoy currently.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm just going to lay down maybe the foundation of September 30th and why it is an actual national holiday. So it's actually in response to number 80, the calls to action outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation Act. And we'll include the Truth and Reconciliation Act in our show notes. So if you're like, what is this? But it was an agreement that was penned by a lot of Indigenous groups, elders, leaders within Canada, and said, okay, based on what's happened, this is what needs to happen for truth and for reconciliation to us. So Action 80 was one of the actions that is responsible for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And it says, quote, "We call upon the federal government in collaboration with the Aboriginal peoples to establish as a statutory holiday a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to honor survivors, their families and communities, and ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process," end quote. So September 30th is really a day to honor Indigenous children that were taken away through the residential school system. I'm not going to go into that because I feel like if you're listening, that's your responsibility. So it's not only to remember Indigenous children, it's also to raise awareness of the horrific experiences that they experienced in these schools. And the third thing is that and I think this is very important, but it's a moment to recognize not only historic harm, but the intergenerational impact and ongoing violence Indigenous communities continue to face. I feel like that's really key because we can remember the history and be like, oh, that was terrible. Oh, never again. That won't happen. Clean slate. We're moving on. That's not what this day is about, right? So it is very much to remember that intergenerational impact and the cycle of violence that is perpetuated not only within Indigenous communities, but from governments and from politicians and from certain groups that would rather deny Indigenous people that right.
Yeah. Especially Indigenous women are still being murdered.
Yes.
Had a highest rate in the whole country compared to other demographics.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of issues. And so I think, I don't know about you, Hoshin, but when I first came to Canada, I was fed an immediate trope and lie about Indigenous people when I opened a bank account. I was at Scotiabank. The gal was helping me and she was a white lady, blonde hair, blue-eyed. And I said, "Where have you lived in Victoria long?" She's, "Not too long. I used to live in Duncan." And she had a slur for Duncan, which Duncan, if you're not familiar, on Vancouver Island, is host to a lot of Cowichan tribes and First Nations. But it was a slur. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to give it power. But I just thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that means. And so from that slur, like I didn't know, but that's the thing that like immigrants don't know. We're just told something and then we're not even, we don't know how to challenge that or even to think twice about it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was awful.
That's not great at all.
Yeah.
In general, I have no idea. Before coming to Canada, I have no idea of the Indigenous situation here. In general, just thought it's not going to be great. Because everywhere I've been, like Australia and the States, I know they've been not treating great. So at first I literally have no image or preconception of what Canada was as a country. So just, probably just another white country that treats Indigenous badly. Just one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, many ways it still is, but I also see the effort because we mentioned that our previous episode about Indigenous people as well, that, for example, the orientation we already was taught Indigenous culture and history, which was really surprising.
Yeah, at our university. Yeah,
our orientation.
Yes.
We all Indigenous history and culture. And I was like, what is this?
Yes. And we are really fortunate, but not every educational system does that.
True. Our university is doing great, but to be honest, our university also is signing on a treaty too, on a reserved land, and it was loaned to the university too. The Indigenous can be loaned to the university, so in some sense, it's the only right thing to do.
Yes, exactly. It is.
We are literally on their homes.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In some sense, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thinking about immigration, though, I think. We see this I see this more now sitting in Canada after 9 years. But I don't know that all immigrants see that the immigration process is very much a settler colonial concept. And what I mean by that is that it was created to build infrastructure and to build a system that benefits predominantly white presenting or Eurocentric people. And we still see this in the draws. We see this in the ways in which international students are being punished for living here. We've seen this in the history, the way that Canada treated Japanese people, Chinese people, the Dokbors from Russia. So we see there's a long history of kind of this concept that there is a hierarchy and it's white people at the top and all of y'all who aren't fit our bill on the bottom. But it never, so this is part of the reason why immigration consults and engages with Indigenous leadership and representation in Immigration Matters.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still not. So we're not. Which I would love to work towards that effort in my lifetime here in Canada. But Stats Canada back in 2021 said that 23% of Canada's population are actually born outside of Canada. This means that 23%, almost a quarter of the population, are born outside of Canada, and they do not know or have education around the truth of what's happened to Indigenous people on these lands in Turtle Island. That's a lot of people.
A lot of people.
It's a lot of people. And if Canadian-born people aren't already doing that, which we do know statistically not a lot are, I can see why immigration is a very, at least I would imagine if I was an Indigenous person, I can imagine being concerned about that because, again, you see these benefits, you see a lot of funding going towards immigration settlement and services, and yet we still don't have clean water. We still don't have justice in our communities. Our women go missing. So I could see where, and we've experienced some people who profess to be Indigenous saying, we do have a problem with immigration. And I'm like, absolutely, you have that right. Absolutely. But it is one of those things that shapes really what our responsibility is to allyship. There was a great study, came out of the Toronto Montreal University back in 2022, and it's called The Reciprocal Views of Immigrants and Indigenous Peoples in Canada. Mm-hmm. So they surveyed Indigenous people and immigrants coming to Canada about their mutual views of each other. So they surveyed Indigenous people about immigration, and they surveyed immigrants about their views of Indigenous people, culture, history. So I'm just going to real quickly tap out 3 points. So regarding the history of residential schools, 44% of immigrants who responded said that they're somewhat familiar with the history of residential schools in Canada, while only 17% said they were very familiar. And most of that 17% was second and third generation immigrants.
Oh.
So your first generation immigrants, obviously, they don't have that knowledge and education. So of course they're going to be like, I think I know, not very sure, familiar, but not too much, right? Another key point was they surveyed about the government's role of reconciliation. So they asked, what do you think about the government's role in creating reconciliation for Indigenous people? 43% say that the government hasn't done enough reconciliation, which, you know, that 43%, it's not more than half, but it's there, right? But 20% actually said that the government has done too much.
23%?
20% said that the government has done too much for reconciliation. That's the icky. Yeah, that's the icky. Because if you look at what the government has done, it's really
not too much. Like, even with quoting a first stat, 40+% of people only
43%.
somewhat, exactly, only somewhat knows. It means the government has not done enough, at least, to educate the new immigrants to what is happening or what had happened to the Indigenous community here. That stat itself is a statement, is a proof that the government has not done enough.
Exactly. And it's part of the education too, because a lot of immigrants come with families. Their kids going into the public school system aren't also getting this education. And it's intersectional. It's wherever you are.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then the third point I want to point out in this study, they asked immigrants, what is a Canadian's individual role in truth and reconciliation, which I think is a very good question. Because very good, because the government does have a role. I think we as citizens and as individuals living in Canada have a role. So the majority said that we do have a role, while there were some that said we don't really have a role, and I don't even know. And the percentages were just about 17-20% across all of it. So that's how immigrants really perceive. And I do feel like it doesn't paint a very good picture. And this is why we're going to camp for the rest of the episode on allyship.
Yeah, I think this data also really, let's say is I would say it is correct. Maybe that's not a good word to use. I think it's definitely some sort of reflection, some sort of truth to the status of immigrants' knowledge to indigenous issues and histories, and definitely not a great light, not a great
No.
result. Yeah, but I also not necessarily really surprised because, like, I think me and you are all students in general that come to Canada as the immigrants come to Canada as a student is a, in some sense special case because we go to education system that in some sense we have access to knowledge and access to teachers that can teach us resources that will give us information about indigenous issues and histories. But a lot of
Right.
other immigrants maybe like come here through, I mean, maybe they're the parents of the landed immigrants, or maybe they here because of business or other status or skilled workers. They might not necessarily have the access or schooling that can give them direct information like this. That we
Mhm.
might have to go literally, they have to have a self motivation to study and go do it on to learn about it online. In
Yeah.
some sense, usually less likely people
Right.
will actually do that. And yeah, in some sense. And also I think the government, I really think the government does is still not doing enough in terms of promoting or providing more free access or even compulsory, maybe even examinations or testing to new immigrants, new land immigrants to Canada
Right.
as well. And I
Yeah.
think that's something they can have to do better
Right.
for that.
Yeah. There's a lot of requirements that immigrants have to check the box in order to come to Canada.
But
Where's
yeah,
that
but
box? Where is
yeah,
it? Right?
you
We're
just
going
need
to take,
one more.
yeah,
I
just one
know.
more. We all took an English language test. Why can't we take an
English.
Indigenous history test?
Yeah, I remember I have the like English test, of course, a medical
The
check,
health.
and also
Mm-hmm.
I think your for me, I have to get like a certification that I'm like a resident or like citizen of China. My passport's not enough. I remember some sort of
Oh,
residency proof or something, and then all my transcript from my previous
yep.
school, like there's a lot in
And
financial
money.
statements. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of requirement. Why don't
Yep.
you just add one more? Oh, you have to study this, I don't know,
A
indigenous
test.
history. Yeah, take a little test,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. It's
know?
easy. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think that can be done. And so that's why I think allyship and even integration in Canada's immigrants is absolutely essential. So, what is allyship? I think this is a good question because we hear it. I've heard it. And I think that across the board, there probably are some variations. But in the context of Indigenous allyship, I'm going right to the Native Women's Association of Canada. And this
Mhm.
is from their website. It's a Generation for Equality fact sheet. And they said, quote, for non-Indigenous people, it means understanding how systems work against Indigenous peoples, as well as reflecting on your own role in equality, end quote. So that is
Mhm.
what allyship is. It's not only just learning, but understanding how these systems are still operating and still working, and what is my role and how does that intersect with these systems, right? I love this other piece that they highlight. They said, quote, it's the reconciliation of historical and contemporary wrongdoings and rectification of the inequitable colonial systems, end quote. So you've heard allyship, and I guess from being a
Mhm.
person of color, Hoshin, do you identify with that kind of allyship as far as like your own intersectionality in Canada, being a person of color and an immigrant and all of that? Would you say that aligns with how you see an ally or allyship?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see an ally as someone who not just knows like the struggle, like our collective struggle as like a POC or even as a queer person, but also understands as a system, as you just mentioned, that right now, just in every society, every space I walked in, in some sense, has some sort of elements against me. Because every space I walk, for example, if using my queerness as example, is always very straight. We call it heteronormative. Even
Right.
conversations or expectations, most of them are very heteronormative, right? So in some sense, that's what I believe example that is an example of what is called a system that's still against me. This
Mm-hmm.
whole world in general is still under this heteronormative system that's against me. And I believe for indigenous people too, like this colonialism still is everywhere we walk to in general is still under this colonial mindset too. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
still we are all a product of colonialism too, right? So
Right.
it takes a lot for us to unlearn to also understand that they are still under the oppression
Mm-hmm.
of colonialism
Mm-hmm.
much more than anyone
Mm-hmm.
else.
which colonialism, I think we unpacked a bit ago, is that hierarchy, right? It's that
Exactly.
there's one group up here that kind of holds all the power and all the agency, and everyone else serves those people in power. Yeah. And I think as a white person myself, that is a term I feel like, and this is just me, I feel like it's a term that is given to you by underrepresented people. It is
Yes,
not
you don't call
something
yourself.
that you claim. This is not
You can
something you like, oh, someone said I'm an ally, so I'm going to get a little badge on my sweater. I'm going to put a bumper sticker. But it is something that honestly is, I feel like it's earned, and I feel like it's only applicable if other people use it for you. But that is a term for myself that I don't use really ever. And I will wait for that particular person to see me as that or to say that.
I think you can say I'm inspired. I aspire to be an ally, or I want to be an ally. I'm trying to be an ally on this issue, or be this for this group.
Right. Yeah.
But you say, "Oh, I'm an ally." I was like, "Who?"
Check.
I think the true.
Yeah.
I feel like the true ally will not say that. The true ally will say, "Oh, I'm an ally already." I don't think a true ally will actually say that.
My name's Kimberly. I'm an ally. Sorry, Kimberly, if you're listening. Yeah, no, it's true. And I think that's the key part, is that allyship, it's not a checkbox. It's an ongoing process. It is a journey. It is continued engagement. It is continued learning and listening. It is something that is not just for today, like it is for it's a relationship that you operate in and with and for people. That's how I see it. Yeah.
I see that too, like for Indigenous issue as well. Like I also, even though, yeah, we both, when we were in school, had educations on history and issues, but that's many years ago. And this topic has been evolving based on political climate changes and Indigenous issue being also developed. And definitely it's for us too. If we want to be an ally, we also have to constantly educate ourselves. What is the current issue now? What has been changed? What is the dynamic difference right now? Is like, for some, clean water has been a long ongoing issue. And then what is the development? What can we do now? What is the things that we can actually go to the government, and I sometimes point fingers at them to tell them to do? Like, it's an ongoing thing. You can't just say that you know something and then boom, done. My education is done. I understand the situation history now. That's
exactly. Yep. Check. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Words alone fall short. I think it does require engagement and action. And this is going to be our last point. How do we do it? How do we create allyship? So there's a wonderful paper out of Wilfrid Laurier University back in 2015 from the Office of Aboriginal Initiatives called Indigenous Allyship, an Overview. And again, we'll include it in our show notes. But the first point is building relationships with Indigenous people. And that means with First Nations, with Inuit, with Métis, with people in your life, and building that trust. If you think about a relationship, a healthy one, positive one, we're not talking about the toxic ones, we're talking about the good ones, that it is very much built on trust. It's built on time spent learning. It's relationships that are healthy are not about taking the lead in a relationship. It's about going together side by side. It includes also accountability, that if a friend were to say to you, hey, what you said was actually really hurtful, that you would be willing to take that in and say, you know what, I'm very sorry. That was inappropriate. I'm going to try and do better. Because I think it is this kind of tokenism to say, I'm friends with Indigenous people. Oh, I have this Indigenous person in my life. That's not a relationship. That's just like saying, look who's in my bag that I can pull out and use whenever I want. It's colonial, but that's not a relationship. Yeah. And then that you take the responsibility in that relationship to defend, to engage, to act upon, and to be a safe space for that person too. And that comes with a lot of self-learning.
Yeah, I've also relationship two ways, right? It's not like because you know this person or like this person is mutual. It's only when it's mutual that you have a relationship. So the other person also, as you mentioned, have to feel safe around you, have to feel that they can trust you, they can rely on you in a certain way, that they can talk to you in a certain way. That's only then you have some sort of relationship developed. So that means you, from our side, we also have to, again, go back to the safe space part, be able to be always a good person, a person there, create safe space to lend your shoulder, your ears, whatever they need from you there as well. And this kind of with no judgment, with complete
Right.
trust and understanding as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And curiosity. Yeah. No
Oh,
judgment.
that part.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're
Always
big proponents of curiosity.
curiosity. I love that word because I also love, like, even just some personal thing happened. Like, I think it's a common thing. People always love to engage in things with judgment first, rather than with curiosity. Like, there's
Right.
something happened in my personal life that has created some drama because people did not ask questions. They just assume this person did these things because of bad intention. But then but even just one question after, realize that person just didn't know that was how things are supposed to be done in this group, because this person new to the friend group. And then I was just like, see, if we engage in curiosity, ask this person a question, this whole drama and judgment will be completely gone. That won't happen in the first place. And this person will feel welcomed. We will welcome this person with open arm. And now this person is hurt because we judge him before anything else.
It's
and
the
I
difference.
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I just feel like that should be, like, I think we can all learn this to everyone, every Indigenous, especially when we listen whatever news on things on the news, or especially bad things about Indigenous communities, or whatever rumor we heard. Maybe engage it as a curiosity. What is happening? Is that true? Should we talk about it with someone who actually understands Indigenous history and the issues to see whether that is truth?
Yeah. What you're talking about, it's calling someone in instead of calling them out, which calling in is inviting that conversation. What do you mean? Can you explain that? You ask them questions and you try to make them think about what they're actually saying. Because more often than not, a lot of people have not thought about what they're saying. They've just heard it. It hits a tone with them and they're like, yeah, I agree. But they haven't really digested it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. The second is to learn and listen. Learn about your own privileges as immigrants, as people who are coming to Canada. Learn about the honest history of Canada. We've talked about single-sided stories. Canada has a version that's beautifully laid out in its citizenship test. And then there's the honest history, which is the truth part of the Truth and Reconciliation, right? Learn about the land you live on. There are incredible resources. We'll even include it in our show notes that you can actually just type in the city, wherever you are in Canada, even in the States, type it in and you can see which nations live there. You can see if it's Métis land or if it's Inuit land. You can see if it's what's under a treaty, or if that treaty has been broken. You can find, and there's websites you can connect to. So learn about the land you live on. Learn about diverse cultures and traditions of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. It's really easy to be like all Indigenous people. Indigenous is a generalized term that includes First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. So the story of the raven is going to be different with Inuit traditions than, let's say, Haida Gwaii, right? There's diversity in that. So learning about that and then listening. I think we need to really listen to the voices of Indigenous people, of what they're going through, of perspectives. That's really important, because we can talk all day long, but if we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, we should listen twice as much and speak.
Exactly.
Right?
And the listening part also, that means we have to create space for them to talk.
Yes.
We have to create space for them to talk. I think a really good example is land acknowledgement. In BC especially, I don't know other provinces, almost everywhere I go, whenever there's an activity going on in a public setting, there's always going to be land acknowledgement, which is good in many ways. But again, we also talk about it in, I think, previous episode about Indigenous people and issues as well, that is sometimes it can be just like a formality, but in the spirit of really truly to understand and to, again, listen, we have to also be able to maybe invite Indigenous people in this space to do actually do the land acknowledgement, because they are the one who welcoming you. Sometimes I feel like it's a bit interesting if a white person doing a land acknowledgement, but you are not the person who invites me. Is it? Or not that white people cannot do land acknowledgement, but I think if you really gonna do the land acknowledgement, you have to make sure that you really knows, understands, and cares about this issue. Yeah, make the effort, not just really just read something you can easily find online. educate yourself before you do that acknowledgement. There's something to say to make sure that when you adjust to people in the room, they also get something from you that is about the indigenous issues and histories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So well said. The last point is just taking action. That's getting involved with Indigenous advocacy. It also might be investing in Indigenous-owned businesses. If you know of even Canadian politicians or people in your community who are running for a specific office, canvass for them. Take a session, an educational session. There are so many First Nations and Indigenous community centers all over Canada that offer community development and training that you can learn the history of the local peoples. You can actually get to know people. You can volunteer at there's one here, the Victoria Native Friendship Center. They do like a free soup lunch to the community every Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone and volunteered before. There's so many opportunities that you can do. So taking that action, because at the end of the day, being an ally goes beyond checking off those actions. Because it's not a competition. It's not, oh, look, I did this and this. I'm an ally. It is this ongoing, it's a way of being and doing. It's a conscious effort of always activating your heart and your head into things that really and truly matter, that are life-giving. It is a way of life. It is a way of being and living. And that's how you are an ally. And that's essential, especially as an immigrant to Canada. It's our responsibility, it's our right, and it is our privilege to learn and to share what is here that has been preserved and kept by Indigenous people since time immemorial.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely, I think that's a really good way to sum as immigrants. That is really our right, our responsibility, and our privilege.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Hoshin, for Truth and Reconciliation Day. Go out and there's going to be activities everywhere. If this is brand new for you, that is okay. Again, allyship and learning does not operate out of guilt. It operates out of curiosity, love for yourself, and love for other people. Do what you can.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea, for guiding this conversation and preparing all this information for us. Thank you so much. And on the Truth and Reconciliation Day, let's all go out and learn something new. And again, engage with curiosity, and we all can do better.
We all can. Yeah. Each and every day. So to end this episode, let's do a Canadian salad pump quiz.
Yes!
Where I don't know your question, you don't know my question, and we're going to see who gets 50,000 points. That's on the line. 50,000 points, Ocean.
I don't know.
We'll see.
That is okay.
It's a bit high. I know. But that's what I'm feeling today. 50,000. Do you want to go first?
Okay, I can do first. What is the percentage of First Nations water system that is at a high or medium risk of contamination? Because we talk about clean water.
Yes. Oh gosh, it's gonna be high. I want to say 72%.
Very close. It's 73.
It's 73%.
I know it's really high, isn't it?
Ocean, wow. And that's on First Nations, on the reserves where First Nations people were
communities in general, First Nation communities. Yes, it's crazy. 73% of First Nations water system are at a high or medium risk of contamination. This is stats from the Council of Canadians.
That's appalling.
That's really appalling. I agree. That's so yeah, immigrants here, we come here in those cities or even some remote areas, rural areas, we all have, a lot of us just said, we'll just open the tap water, don't worry about a thing. But a lot of indigenous who actually the original owner of these lands has to worry about water, which is the basic need of survival.
It's everything. Yeah. So that just goes to show we have an immense, incredible responsibility as immigrants to advocate for.
Agree. Every time you drink a cup of water, you have enjoying a privilege a lot of indigenous does not. So again, we must do something to advocate, be their voice as well.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay. So my question is, Hoshin, out of the 94 calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Act, How many have been completed as of 2024?
Oh my God, like 8.
You're really close. It's 11.
Oh, it's double digit? I'm surprised.
Yeah, double digit. Yeah. So this is according to indigenouswatchdog.org. They said 11 of the calls to action are complete, 39 are in progress, which represents about 66% of the C2A calls to actions. Yeah. It's and the Truth and Reconciliation Act that was developed back in, I think it was 2015, we're only about 9 years in and we've only got 11 done. Again,
So one
all
a
the
year.
more, yeah, about. So all the more reason why we need to get engaged and we need to take action and we need to make this a part of our integration into Canada. If you're going to learn about politics, you're going to learn about anything that's quote unquote Canadian, man, Indigenous history
issues.
and issues, that is, I think that is a bit more important than knowing the toys and the loyalists and all those bits. Anyway, so thank you for joining us. Yeah, we are looking forward to joining you next week, and stay kind, stay curious, and stay safe.
Exactly. We'll talk to you next
Yeah.
week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hoshin Ho and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Janklin production.